So, as we said, this Shabbos is Chayel. It's a very big celebration by Chassidim, and he says right away at the beginning what Chayel is. Chayel, Yom HaLedes Shel Mereina Baal Shem Tov B'Shnas Nachas, in the year of 5,458. How many years ago is that from 5,084? 784, you're going to have to figure that out. In the year 5,505. Yedua, Shadmur Azakin Noig Likre LeBaal Shem Tov Saba. Zeide, he used to go around, he said, the Zeide, he used to call him grandfather. Lefi Pshutam Shal Advarim Hu, Mishmad Mur Azakin Haya Talmid Talmidah Shal Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov had his student, the Mezritcher Maggid, Reb Boruch Mezhibuzher of Mezritch, and he was the sole Rebbe that took over after the Baal Shem Tov. Then afterwards, many students of the Mezritcher Maggid spread out in many different countries. They divided up the map. They said, you go here, you go there. The Alter Rebbe was meant to take over Lithuania and Russia with teaching Chassidus. And he was a student of the Baal Shem Tov student. He was a student of the Mezritcher Maggid. So because he was a student of the Baal Shem Tov, that's why he called him my grandfather. Since teaching someone Torah is as if you gave birth to him, so therefore someone that is your teacher's teacher is like a grandfather, because the one who taught you is your father, and the one that taught him is his father, so it's like your grandfather. But the Rebbe says this is not enough of a reason why the Alter Rebbe called the Baal Shem Tov his grandfather. It only says it's like that I really gave birth to him. That really there's a difference between a biological child versus someone that you teach. That when a person teaches a student, all he can share with the student is only what's called in Chassidus terminology a ray of his mind. I can't literally give you a piece of my mind, even though there's such an expression in English. The proof of it is, if I'm explaining something to someone and they don't have the intellectual capacity to be able to understand, they don't have a head on their shoulders, they are, let's say, a baby, so as much as I explain, they will not get it. Why? Chassidus uses a Yiddish expression, a kop kamrish arufteln. You can't put a head on someone's shoulders. Why? Because an idea is only an illumination. It's a ray that I'm sharing with someone else. Just to give an example, if I illuminate a room, so then if your eyes are open, you could see what's going on. So, in an idea, I'm shining a light on something. I'm illuminating it. But if you don't have the power of sight, if a person doesn't have the power of sight, you could turn on the light, he's not going to see anything. If a person doesn't have a head, you can't see anything. Because when I share an idea with someone else, as a teacher, or in any other way, I'm only sharing a ray of it. What does a parent do? A parent creates the brain. A parent gives the child the brain. So therefore, sharing an idea with someone, teaching someone, even though we say it's like they gave birth to him, but it's not actually giving birth, because giving birth, you're actually giving them the brain. Whereas a teacher can only share ideas with someone that has their own brain. So that's what he says. That's why when a teacher teaches someone, it's considered as if he gave birth to him. It's not actual birth. Despite that, so why did Alter Rebbe call the Baal Shem Tov an actual grandfather? He didn't just say, well, the Baal Shem Tov is like my grandfather. He actually considered him his grandfather. You say to him, you do a Mashamar Admor Azakim in the Gel Reb Boruch Mezhibuzher. Reb Boruch Mezhibuzher was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, a biological grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He was a son of the Baal Shem Tov's daughter Adel. With Ben Benoy, there's even a special advantage over a son, a grandson that comes from a daughter versus a grandson that comes from a son. There's a whole story with the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the son of a daughter of the Alter Rebbe, that Chassidim explained had a special, unique connection with the Alter Rebbe, because what it says, Isha, Ish Mazriat Tchila, Yeled is Bas, that's the daughter, and Isha Mazriat Tchila is Ben, that's you. So therefore there's in some ways a stronger connection between a grandson that comes via a daughter than a grandson that comes via a son. I'm not going to get into that, the whole idea. So Reb Boruch Mezhibuzher was a biological grandson via a daughter. So the Alter Rebbe said, it's wonderful, you have very nice pedigree, you have good yichus, but he said, Shehu Reb Boruch Nechdish al Hashem Tov V'gashnis, V'ani Amar Admor Azokn al Atzmai, Nechdish Beruchnis V'zoisu Amar al Yusad. The Alter Rebbe was saying, I have an advantage over you, because I'm a spiritual grandchild of Baal Shem Tov, whereas you are only a biological grandchild. By using this term and saying that the Baal Shem Tov is his grandfather, it means he tapped into what the Baal Shem Tov was inwardly and internally. Not just like we said before, the illumination, like when you teach an idea. It wasn't just that the Baal Shem Tov transmitted ideas to the Mezritcher Maggid, and the Mezritcher Maggid transmitted those ideas and illuminated those ideas by the Alter Rebbe. It was a much deeper connection. Even that which birth cannot convey from father to son, that deep connection was there to be found by the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov, and that's why the Alter Rebbe said, you, Reb Boruch, are only a biological grandson. I, on the other hand, am a spiritual grandson, meaning I have a connection with the very essence of the Baal Shem Tov. And this is an idea that the Rebbe often emphasizes, that what the Baal Shem Tov stood for and what the Baal Shem Tov was about, awakening the inner Jew and awakening Klal Yisrael, the Alter Rebbe was the conveyance of that and the transmitter of that and the actualization of that. That the Alter Rebbe brought it down, as we're soon going to learn in this Sikha also, what the Baal Shem Tov stood for, the Alter Rebbe brought it down in an even more practical way. How can this be? Tzadikim doimim leboirim, the Chazal say that tzadikim are likened to their creator, to Hashem. Hashem said that the Rosh Tevis of the word Anoichi, in Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, the first word of the Aseres HaDibros. Why does it say Anoichi instead of Ani Hashem Elokecha? So there is, Anoichi is a Rosh Tevis, an acronym for these four words, which in Aramaic mean, I wrote myself into the Torah and I gave it. In other words, Hashem didn't just give us ideas and mitzvahs in the Torah, but Hashem gave Himself. Hashem inserted Himself in the Torah. This is what Chassidus always talks about, Tanya speaks about. When a person learns Torah and fulfills mitzvahs, this is a way to grasp and embrace Hashem and to make Hashem part of us. So just like it's so by Hashem, that Hashem invested and embedded Himself in Torah, they also embed themselves in Torah. So therefore, it's not just about a ha'ara, it's not just about communicating a ray, it's not just a revelation of the Baal Shem Tov's mind that was communicated to the Alter Rebbe, but rather the very being of the Baal Shem Tov was communicated via his Torah to the Alter Rebbe. Betoyres Achsidus Himshach Baal Shem Tov Satz Miyusa Yafiles Masha Eino Over Ma'avla Ben. The Baal Shem Tov invested in Chassidus, embedded in Chassidus, such a deep part of his being, even that part that a father does not convey and transmit to a child. He took the most inner part of the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, and he brings in the footnote a story that the Reb Boruch who was a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, said that he used an expression, all of us, the students of the Mezritcher Maggid, ate from the same bowl, but the Baal Shem Tov took the best part. So in other words, the Alter Rebbe took the best part, meaning that the Alter Rebbe really connected with the inner idea of what the Baal Shem Tov was about. So by taking the inner teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, he also took the inner being of the Baal Shem Tov that's transmitted through his teachings. More so is he a grandson even than the biological grandson Reb Boruch. Yichud pnimi va'atzmi zeh shal Admor Zaken o Baal Shem Tov, his bate gam bekach sheleidosom beguf hagashmi. Va'aguf harei kosher matzmusi yisbarach. Chassidus often speaks about that the body of a Jew is connected with Hashem's very essence, because Hashem chose us from all the nations, is referring to our bodies, because our bodies are similar to the bodies of all the nations. So the physical birth of the physical body of the Alter Rebbe with the physical birth of the physical body of the Baal Shem Tov, Yom Haledes Shel Shneim Hu Ba'osi Yom Chai El. Both of them took place on the 18th of El, which indicates this deep connection. The fact that they were both born on the same day indicates that deep connection. As we know, that nothing in Yiddishkeit is by chance, and when the tzaddik's neshama especially comes down into this world, this resonates in all the spiritual realms, and this is a cause for joy in all the spiritual realms. The Rebbe speaks about that even after the tzaddikim pass away. You would think, why celebrate the birthday of someone that passed away? But even in Gan Eden, they are still marking their birthday, and they have spiritual elevations, and the mamorim they recite in Gan Eden are connected with their new birthday, and so on. So therefore, this is an ongoing connection and an everlasting connection that the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe have by sharing the same physical birthday of their physical body. So now the Rebbe goes on to say, once we've established that the connection between the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov is an even more powerful connection than a biological grandson, so now we have to explain how it's really a two-way process. There's a double approach over here. On the one hand, the grandson receives from the grandfather. On the other hand, we're going to explain that the grandson completes and perfects what the grandfather is about. Like I was mentioning before, when someone, just to bring a simple example, it's going to apply later on. If I come up with an idea for a certain invention or some practical solution to a problem, the person that takes that idea and knows how to run with it and apply it to the real world is like perfecting the idea that was there theoretically. We're going to talk about how the Alter Rebbe, being the spiritual grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, took the ideas of the Baal Shem Tov, took the concepts of the Baal Shem Tov, and brought them down in a more practical, physical, down-to-earth way. Where do we see that the grandson is someone that completes the grandfather and perfects him? That the Torah will not leave from the descendants of your descendants. Descendants of descendants, that's 2 generations over, to the grandson. It says that the Torah returns to its previous hosts. In other words, since the grandfather was a host for Torah, so maybe if the son is not the way they're supposed to be, but it'll eventually hit the grandson, will connect with it. We see this a lot in the last few decades, where you see people talk about, my grandfather was a rabbi in Russia and Europe and this and that, and he had a long big beard, and all of a sudden the grandkids are getting more involved in Torah mitzvahs, because this is the system. Maybe in the middle it can get messed up, but the grandson is eventually going to come back to it. V'nemar, it says, Ateres kainim bnei bonim, that the adornment, the beautification, the crown, literally, of the grandfathers are their children, just like our grandchildren. So just like a crown is meant to adorn the person that's wearing the crown, so we say the grandchildren, the bnei bonim, are the crown of the grandfather. So we see that's a two-way street. The grandfather obviously shares and gives to the grandchildren, but the grandchild also adds a crown to the grandparents. Since the Alter Rebbe said that he is a grandson of Baal Shem Tov, so both apply by him. Aleph, who not less atzmis Baal Shem Tov kanal. First of all, he didn't just take the external. He wasn't just like a biological grandson, and he wasn't just an intellectual ray of revelation of the teachings, but he connected with the very essence of the Baal Shem Tov. But even more so, the Alter Rebbe is necessary for bringing the Baal Shem Tov's teachings and what he stood for to fruition. Hu mashlim es Baal Shem Tov, kavonas Torahs Baal Shem Tov nishlemes aydei Torahs Chassidus Chabad. Chassidus Chabad maila gam es chagas v'nehim. There are the emotional attributes of Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, and then there's Netzach, Chod, Yisod, Malchus. There's all different aspects of a person's being. Other Chassidim are known as Chassidus Chagas. Their serving Hashem is based solely on emotion. It's their excitement, their passion, their dancing, their singing, etc., etc. Chassidus Chabad is based on intellect. So you would think intellect and emotions are two separate worlds. It's an either-or scenario. There are those that serve Hashem with emotions, and then there's those that serve Hashem with intellect. So the Rebbe says over here, not that way. Chabad being the beginning, Chochmah Bina V'das being the beginning of all the powers, so it influences and impacts even the emotions and all the way down into action. So by taking the Baal Shem Tov's essence and bringing it down into Chabad, that's what the Alter Rebbe did. He took the teachings and the views and the approach of Baal Shem Tov, and he had it permeate Chochmah Bina Das, the intellect, that impacts not just the intellect, but also our emotions, and even to those that Chabad, the intellect, is not such a thing that they're connect with. Okay, before b'makom macher shechsidus Chabad Paula shafilu anoshim pshutim shelachura einam sheyachim lahavana v'asaga gam heim yecholim lis'alas aydei chsidus Chabad ledarga nailis yoyser masher aydei teres chsidus haklolis. It's very interesting. The idea of chsidus Chabad is such that it can even elevate those that may have been exposed to the general chassidus, and they do not have necessarily the intellectual capacity to understand the depth of chassidus Chabad, and chassidus Chabad still elevates them. And again, we see it throughout, Chabad houses of the world over. We see it in Shiur Tanya. People that have not been exposed to Torah study, have no knowledge of the in-depth teaching of the Torah. They come to a Tanya Shir, they're inspired, they're elevated, they're transformed, even though they may not even have the language to be able to express, what did you learn that inspired you so much? I don't know. I just feel it. I just connect with it. That's what Chassidus Chabad does. It permeates even in the most ordinary fashion. It says that Reb Hill, I think it was Reb Hill Paritcher, that he was told by one of the Rebbeim, maybe the Mittler Rebbe, to go to travel different cities and towns and villages, and to review with them, with the people of the city, Chassidus, teach the Mamorim of Chassidus. And he said that he went to a certain place, and they really didn't have the intellectual capacity and the background necessary to be able to understand the deep concepts that he was relating. But I think the Rebbe who sent him told him that the neshama heard. The soul hears it. And that impacts, the soul hearing impacts the person. What?
We have a future.
No one is hopeless. Milvad zois, shadmur hazakim v'nesiach Chabad shel ha'achrov gilu hayridu v'ilbishu as Torahs Baal Shem Tov b'seichel dekdusha ad shekol echad yuchol ha'avina afilu b'seichel anushi. In addition to the idea that the Alter Rebbe took ideas of the Baal Shem Tov and transmitted it and brought it down into a way, a language that human intellect can process. How come? So here the Rebbe is going to bring a rule that Chassidus, and a principle that Chassidus always says. When a person needs to join two things together, they must be above and more powerful than both things. To be able to communicate a deep idea, let's say, to a child, obviously I need to be smarter than a child, but also I have to have mastery and control over the idea. Or if I need to teach a great deep idea by using an analogy, a metaphor, I need to have such mastery over the idea that I'm able to manipulate it and find a mashal, a metaphor, an analogy to use. The same thing is going to speak about over here. The Baal Shem Tov's teachings could be sometimes very esoteric, very mystical, removed from the world. The Alter Rebbe took the Baal Shem Tov's teachings and brought it into human intellect. That means that he brought down a greater power than the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, thereby completing and perfecting the teachings of Baal Shem Tov. So he says, Shekain, last line on the first column of 116, as Torahs Baal Shem Tov, Shilamayla Maseichel, Tzrichim Lakach Koyach Naila B'Yoser. Val Yodov, Niten Lahamshech Naila B'Yoser, Amevil De Shleimus. Let me just give you another example. It says that when Reb Meir, and it could be we had this once in the Shir, when Reb Meir passed away, the Moishlim Mishaldim, people that could make metaphors and analogies, stopped. And it says that Reb Meir used to be able to give on everything 300 Mishalim. Shlomo HaMelech, who was the author of Mishlei, Proverbs, the whole Mishlei is not literal. It's all analogies and metaphors for different spiritual things. And the power of Shlomo HaMelech was, the Chazal say, that he could say 3,000 mishalim for everything. He could give 3,000 metaphors to explain everything, and every metaphor was one level lower and lower and lower. Why? Because his mastery of the subject was so powerful that he could even find a metaphor that could speak to the most simplest of people. That is what the Alter Rebbe did with the Torah of Baal Shem Tov. He added a new dimension to the Torah of Baal Shem Tov. Just like we said, the grandson is like a crown for the grandfather. The Alter Rebbe added new dimensions to the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov by being able to bring it down into human intellect that an ordinary person should be able to understand. Ois Gimel. Al pi anal yuvon gam asher kois vat samach tzedek al morazokin. Gam is keini nishmasa Eden shomanu asidois koilea lasayra. The Tzemach Tzedek's biological grandfather was the Alter Rebbe. He said, I heard from my grandfather, also the Alter Rebbe, we heard from, also about the Alter Rebbe, we heard him foretelling future events. He was able to say what's going to happen in the future. And it was exactly on point. It was on target. Kelea al-Asayra means bullseye. It was totally, in Eretz Yisrael we say bull. We say that?
Kalabul.
Kalabul. So In a move on, seemingly it's not understood. Ha'im hoya bekavanas tzemach tzedek l'shabeach as admur azokim binyanim chetzoynim binyanim shel mofsim. Ha'im zeu shevach shel admur azokim. By Chassidim we know that there is the idea of miracles is really beneath the Rabbeim. The fact that the Rabbeim could do miracles, the fact that the Rebbe could do miracles, that's not the great power of the Rebbe. The Rebbe is much more than that. And so the Tzemach Tzedek, who's describing the Alter Rebbe, should be talking about his capabilities of being able to foretell events, exactly what would happen. That's a big deal. There's different descriptions about how by certain Rabbeim, there was miracles constantly going on, but nobody even bothered talking about it. And the Rebbe, there's a famous letter of the Rebbe to the previous Rebbe that he said, even though in previous generations it was not such a big deal to talk about miracles, but our generation is a lower generation, we need more inspiration. So he asked and begged the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, to share stories of the Rabbeim. But the point is that miracles was considered the external power of a Rebbe. The true power of a Rebbe is his inspiration, his teachings, his Torah, his Chassidus that he shared. Therefore, the question is, why did Tzemach Tzedek describe the Alter Rebbe as being able to foretell future events spot on? Is that what the Alter Rebbe is about? That's not who he is. That's not what it's about. Ella Shahezber Lakach is based on what we said before about the Alter Rebbe being a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov that communicates the essence of the Baal Shem Tov. Hadavar babehemshech l'mashakasav lifnechem. Before that, the Tzemach Tzedek wrote the following: Shehu Baal Shem Tov talmidei Reb Maggid Mezritcher Maggid Seiden hayeroyim mesoifa Elul matzoifim mamish ba'ayin re'iyah. The Baal Shem Tov and his student, the Mezritcher Maggid, would see from one end of the world to the other end, mamash, with their sight, with their physical eye, they were able to do so. How is that possible? Because it was revealed before them the light that was created on the first day of creation, that Hashem hid it in the Torah. It says, when Hashem created light on the first day, it says he separated between the light and the darkness. So the Chazal explained what need is there to separate between light and darkness. Light is completely different than darkness. You don't have to separate two things that are completely different from each other. And not only that, if light and darkness come together, the darkness leaves. Rather, there was a more powerful light, a spiritual light, a light that gave the capability to see from one end of the world to the other, that Hashem separated it and put it aside, and he hid it away in Torah. And tzaddikim, because of their holiness and their knowledge of Torah, have access to that light, and because of the having access to that light, they are able to see physically from one end of the world to the other. So the Tzemach Tzedek wrote that the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Maggid had access to this light that was hidden in Torah, that was created on the first day. And then, after saying this about the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Maggid, he said, V'al zeh omer Tzemach Tzedek, Gam miskeinin shmasein shamanu asidris. We also heard foretelling the future from my grandfather, the Alter Rebbe. This wasn't just the Baal Shem Tov and Mezritcher Maggid, this was also the Alter Rebbe. Ma'bitui gam muchach ki asidus shal admor hazokin hem oisi sug shal gabeim amar lefneichen oidus al Baal Shem Tov v'Harav Maggid. When you say also, that's inclusive. So just like the Baal Shem Tov and Mezritcher Maggid had access to this great light that was created on the first day that was put in Torah, so the Alter Rebbe had access to this as well. His godless higher shenir b'yem rishon al she'etz lad morazokin ha'izah b'chinas kelei al asayra, as we'll soon explain. By The Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Maggid, he says that they would see from one end of the world to the other. By the Alter Rebbe, he foretold future events, bull, totally on point. And we'll soon explain what the point of saying that is. First of all, what is this light that was created on the first day? Chassidus explains this is such a light and revelation that transcends all the spiritual worlds that preceded our world. There is a light that preceded the first constriction, where Hashem constricted his light to be able to allow for all the worlds to come into being. Visham Gufa, and in the light before the Tzimtzum, there's a light that its whole purpose is not to illuminate something else, but it's just a manifestation of his essential brightness. It's like the sun doesn't shine light because it wants to illuminate the world. Hashem made the sun a luminous item, and therefore it illuminates the world. But the sun is not there to shine light for others. It's just so bright that it gives off light. The same thing, there is in the essence of Hashem, there is a light that automatically manifests and comes out of him. And that light was what was present in the Torah, and that was what these great tzaddikim had access to. Even the Baal Shem Tov, even the Mezritcher Maggid, felt this light and were aware of this light concerning the physicality of this world. They were able to actually see with their eyes, not that Rebbe says in the footnote, not even with prophecy. It was greater than prophetic vision. It was actual physical sight with their eyes. By the Alter Rebbe, his way of seeing was not less than. But you remember we said before, there's the way the grandson adds and completes and perfects. By the Alter Rebbe, it was more even than how it was by the Baal Shem Tov Mezritcher Maggid. When you use the term kalei lasayra, that it hits the target, it's spot on, that means that this great light permeates and settles and comes all the way down in the most practical, down-to-earth way. Top of the second column, only Hashem's essence, that is beyond any emanations and beyond any opposites, Hashem's very essence can bring together that the light can come down in a way that's settled. Usually, for example, an example for light in Chassidus is often fire. Fire, by its very nature, wants to rise upward, and if you don't have a wick or some type of fuel to hold it down, it will dissipate, it will run up. The same thing, the idea of light in the spiritual sense of Chassidus is a great illumination, but it cannot be settled. Only from Hashem's very essence that he could join together opposites, he's able to take this great illumination and settle it into the world. That is only thanks to the Alter Rebbe's special, unique connection of being able to draw down from Hashem's essence. And this being seen openly will be when Mashiach comes. We'll have two extremes together. What the Alter Rebbe experienced will be for the whole world when Mashiach comes. When Hashem will have his home down here below, which the home has to do with Hashem's very essence living in the home down here below, so then, since Hashem's essence will be present, so even two opposites and extremes, like the physical and the spiritual, can join together. The physical flesh will perceive godliness and it will be settled. Even by the giving of the Torah, when there was this powerful revelation of godliness, it says, Al kol dibur v'dibur parchin shmasim. Every single time every single one of the mitzvahs that Hashem said by the Aseres HaDibros, because it was too powerful of a revelation to be settled within us, it caused our soul to leave our body. When Mashiach comes, we're going to have a revelation akin to that and even higher than that, and it's going to permeate us. It's going to live in the world and be joined with the world. Yes, we could say, Shezeu, Apirish Apnimi shall be Teat Samach Tzedek, Games Gain in Ishmaseid, Shamanu Asidois, Betevas Asidois, Umaramas al Gluim del Osid. In the simple sense that Tzemach Tzedek is saying that even from my grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, we heard what would happen in the future. But he was also hinting at the future time of Mashiach. That with the Alter Rebbe, we experienced what everyone will experience when Mashiach comes, the union of the spiritual and the physical. Chabad. The Alter Rebbe took all of this great spirituality, this great light, this great power of Baal Shem Tov, and embedded it in Chassidus Chabad. As we know, the Rebbe always talks about how the greatest treasures the king expends for being victorious in war. That is, those treasures are to be found in the great secrets that are expressed and able to be digested in our mind through Chassidus Chabad. The godly soul can understand it, but it's not only about the godly soul understanding it, it's settled in our mind. When a person studies Kabbalah, or when a person studies just the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, it's often very vague, it's not settled, as he uses the analogy of a light coming into a vessel. It's not something that's truly grasped. But Chassidus Chabad is about taking ideas and making it grasped. Until even the animal within us can understand it. Until the glory of Hashem will become revealed when Mashiach comes, and all flesh will see. Not just my godly soul, not just my animal soul, but even the physical flesh will be able to see godliness. Gam, that also, the Bias Mashiach, the Kain Bakar of Mamish, and the coming Mashiach speedily Mamish.